Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. How are you guys? This is Madam Azimah. So today we're going to learn how to ask questions correctly when speaking and writing. Now, firstly, let's get through some difficult concepts first. Okay. Auxiliary verbs. What is auxiliary verb? What are they? So let's find out. I've broken it up into three first, okay? So I want you to understand first, if you're writing it down, be, do, and have. Auxiliary verbs are be, do, and have. And I'll break down what's be, what's do, what's have. This is a review of auxiliary verbs first before we start, okay? Now, auxiliary verbs add functional or grammatical meaning to the clause. It usually accompanies a main verb. Now, you might know what all these mean. Don't worry about it. I'll talk about all of this in detail afterwards, okay? But let's break down what's be. What are the be verbs? The be verbs are am, is, and are, which are in the present simple. So, I am walking. He is here. Okay, that's in the present simple, and then in the past simple of that version, it's was and were. Was and were, past simple. And then we also have the negative version, which is am not, just adding not there, or is not, or are not, which are in the negative. And then was not and were not, which are also in the negative. Okay, so be, can you see how many there are in be itself? How many verbs there are under be, right? So remember this, am, is, are, was, and were. And then we have the negative versions, right? So how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. So that's the be verbs. What about do? Now, do is also an auxiliary verb. Do. Let's break it down. Do and does, which is in the present simple. Okay, I do the dishes every night. I do the dishes. So do is basically like, it's a verb because I wash the dishes every night. I did, past simple, I did the dishes last night. So do, does, and did. Did is the past simple of do and does. And then, of course, we have the negative version. All we have to do is put not, but we have made it into a contraction. So don't and doesn't. So they don't. She doesn't. He doesn't. It doesn't. I don't. And then didn't for everything. He didn't, she didn't, I didn't, they didn't, it didn't. All right, are you guys clear now? Auxiliary verbs, we have be and we have do. And then after, below be, there's like 5 of them. Below do, all of that. And then let's move on to have. What's an auxiliary verb have? Let's break it down. Have, we have and has also in the present simple. Okay. Had, which is in the past simple. And then the negative ones, haven't and hasn't. Hadn't, hadn't. All right, that's for have. Okay. A bit technical here, but I do need to go through this one. So in the perfect tense, okay, the perfect tense, it's used with the past participle, which is the verb 3. So just pay attention first. What does it mean? Has, this is a question, has she been here before? Been is verb 3. Okay? This is because it's in the perfect tense. All right, look at this one. Have they visited this place before? Have they visited this place before? All right. So don't worry yet if you still don't understand all of these things yet, but just at least you have it in your head. Be, do, and have. That should be enough right now. Be, do, and have. Those are auxiliary verbs. Because then I want to move on to a different kind of auxiliary verbs. There are also what we call modal auxiliary verbs. Sometimes it's just known as modal verbs. Okay, modal auxiliary verbs are verbs that are used to ask questions or to ask for possibility or permission or ability. So we have these ones. Okay, can, could, may, might, must, shall, should, will, and would. Now, when we want to form questions, we will use these modal auxiliary verbs as well as the auxiliary verbs that I talked before, be, do, and have. Okay, are you guys with me now? It's all coming together, hopefully, because we're going to revisit these auxiliary verbs throughout this session. Okay. Right. Now let's go to the different kinds of questions that we are going to cover today. So we're going to do direct questions, indirect questions, and question tags. So let's go to the first section, section A, direct questions. Now, direct questions are usually used, to ask sort of maybe simple questions or kind of informal. Sometimes it's really direct. Okay, we'll look at some examples. So to form direct questions, there's what we call the WH questions. WH questions are question words, which I'll talk about after this, or a phrase, and you form it like so. So there's a formula there, and I don't want you to worry about this, but this is kind of the formula in a way. So we have the WH question or the phrase, plus the auxiliary verb that I talked about just now, and then the subject, okay, normally a noun, and then a main verb, another verb, okay, and then object or other information, and then question mark. Okay, it looks like maths, but it's very simple. Look at this one. Who are you? What's your name? Where do you live? Why did this happen? So those are the WH questions, okay? Now, this is very simple. However, we do have students or learners writing this and out. So I want you guys to look at what's missing. Where you work, where he going, who you calling, what you talking about. All right, can you tell me what's missing there? Write your answers in the comments. Try it out. What's missing? That's right, auxiliary verbs are missing. Where do you work? Where is he going? Who are you calling? Who or what are you talking about? Now, I know that some of us want to forget all about auxiliary verbs because we want to do it fast, right? Especially when we type WhatsApp and all of that, we miss out auxiliary verb. We want to do it really fast. But this is not correct, especially if you are writing an email, if it's formal situation. So don't do that, okay? All right. So now now you're using the verb itself. Now, how questions. Now, how questions is also part of the direct questions. So when we talk about how much. So when we ask how much, we ask for quantities of nouns that are uncountable. So for example, how much time do you need? How much time do you need? So you can't count time. So you can say, how much time do you need? Or how much information do you need? How much does this cost? For how many, on the other hand, when we ask how many, we're talking about quantities, the amount of nouns that are countable. So you might be wondering, how many slides are there? Okay, so I can count. Now, how often is to ask for frequency. So how often do you travel? How often do you travel? Now, if you say there's a pronunciation here as well. If you choose to say often, it's fine as well. Often or often. I sometimes say often. I sometimes say often, by the way. As for this one, how plus adjective, it's to ask for the degree or amount of things. So, how big is the venue? Okay? Or how handsome is he? If your friend wants to set you up with a friend or whatever. So you can look at the degree, the amount of handsomeness or something. So how questions are used in such a way. Okay? Now let's look to the next type of questions. Yes, no questions. Yes, no questions. This is where we begin with the auxiliary verb. There you go. Auxiliary verb. Okay? Auxiliary verb, this is the formula. Auxiliary verb plus subject plus main verb plus other information object and then a question mark. So yes, no questions. That means that when you ask that question, they can just simply answer yes or no. Okay? For example, have they been to Malaysia before? Do you like durian? Can you understand Malay? And they can just answer yes, no, or yes, basically. But it's up to them if they want to elaborate. But these are basically simple, direct questions. Yeah, yes, no questions. Now let's look at using to be. Using to be. So again, we have the to be verbs. So I've written it down for you. Is, are, was, and were. Now, in a statement, when you're not asking a question, the subject comes before the verb. So very simple, something like this. This is our new office. Okay? This is our new office. But if you want to turn it into a question, to form a question, the subject and verb need to swap places. So instead of this is our new office, change it into a question. Is this our new office? Okay, simple, right? I'm sure you guys know this, so you don't have to write this down. But if this is difficult, then it's okay. You can write this down, but you'll get the slides anyway. Okay, so using to be. Now what happens if the main verb is to be? It may not have the second verb. If the main verb functions, if the main verb itself is to be verbs, which are is, are, was, and were, it acts as the main verb. It doesn't need to have a second verb. Okay, let's look at some examples. Okay, am I late? So you don't say, am I is late? Were they happy with the result? So were functions as the main verb. Were they is happy with the results? Wrong, because there's like a second verb there. Okay. Are you okay? Okay, simple. Was the event interesting? So you don't say, was the event does interesting? Or was the event is interesting? Wrong, because there are two verbs there. So if we're just using the main verb, to be verb as the main verb, you don't have to have the second verb. Are you guys with me? I hope you are. Is that the new iPhone? So you don't say, is that the new iPhone is? Well, I've never heard anyone say that, but you know what I'm saying. Okay? So remember this one. And then I want you to look at this. If you use the to be verb in the past or present or perfect continuous tense, okay, some words there for you to digest, then use the ing form for the main verb. Okay, so just now in the previous slide, I said if the main verb is, as, is, was, and were, if that, then we don't need the second verb. But for this one, if we're using a different kind of tense, okay, a different kind of tense, then the main verb to use there is the ing form. Okay, let's look at this one. Are you listening to the radio right now? So are is a to be verb, and then listening is the ing form of the verb. Okay, ing form. You see that? So there's two verbs there. auxiliary are, and then listening is the ing form because we are using in the present continuous tense. Were you talking to me just now? So were, to be verb there, is a past, okay? Were you talking to me just now? Talking is the ing form of the verb. This is the past perfect continuous tense. Okay, you don't have to memorize these past, present perfect because there's a previous lesson on this one. But I just wanted to tell you that if you're going to do it, you're going to do it with ing. So there's no such thing as, were you talk to me just now? Or are you listen to the radio right now? No. Okay, look at this one. Have you been listening? Have you been living here since 2011? Have you been living here since 2011? So have, and then been and living. Okay, moving on now. Okay, to the next concept, which is how to use do and does. Using do and does. Now, for this particular section here, do and does, pay attention to this one. To form questions without the verb to be, okay, if you're not using the verb to be, you can start the question with do or does. Okay, so this is the formula basically. Do or does plus subject plus base form verb plus the rest of the sentence. That's the formula. Okay, so for example, do I or you or we or they eat, which is the base form of the verb, raw fish, which is the rest of the sentence. Do you eat raw fish? Okay, pay attention to the base form of the verb eat there. How do you use does then? Does is used with he, she, it. Does he, she, it eat raw fish? Okay, it there, obviously, I used it there because I was thinking of an animal, maybe a cat, and you don't know if the cat is male or female. So, does it eat raw fish? All right, now pay attention to the asterisk there, the E-A-T. Okay, the star there, excuse me, eat there. We use the base form of the verb. Do you guys see it? Do you guys see the pattern there? So when we talk about do and does, we use the base form of the verb. So let me emphasize. Always use the base form of the verb. So look at this one. Does he work here? Not does he works here? Right? If you put it into a sentence, it's like this. He works here. He works here. But when I ask a question, it becomes, does he work here? I totally remove the S. Are you guys with me? Another example. Does she love baking? Not, does she loves baking? Okay, loves is a verb. We need to remove the S. We want to use the base form of the verb. Why? Because we have does there. Look at this one. This is a statement. We went to the cinema last week. I want you to ask a question. Did. How would you do that? Try it out. I'll reveal the answer, but I want you to think about this one. We went to the cinema last week, and I want you to turn that into a question. Yeah, ask a question. Did we what? So the answer is, did we go to the cinema last week? Right. If you want to finish it off, you want to make it into a full, you want to repeat that exact same thing. Did we go to the cinema last week? So look at that. I've underlined go. Okay. Because go is the base form for went. Went is a past tense.